Poor hoof health is one of the biggest pains for dairy and beef farmers around the world. When one of your cows is in pain and doesn't walk well, it impacts not only the cow's well-being, fertility and milk production. It also has great consequences for your bottom line, and it may just be the tip of the iceberg of other underlying challenges within your herd. To help give us the best step-by-step advice on how you can improve the hoof health in your dairy herd, I've invited two experts to join me. We've got Jim Bruce, who's the country manager for Australia and New Zealand, and Kai Abrahamsen, Director of Animal Health, Quality Assurance and Sanitary Compliance, also a member of RepVet and an advisor to the European Union. This is the BreedCast, produced by VikingGenetics. I'm your host, Louise Svane. So hello and a warm welcome, Kai and Jim, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Liz.
So I've got Kai right in front of me and Jim remotely from Australia. Hello, Jim.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to have you. So Kai, let's start with an overview here from your perspective. What are the main reasons for poor hoof health in dairy and beef herds around the world?
When we are looking at the situation in at least the Scandinavian and European countries, there's been a major change in how the animals are housed and how they are fed today compared to 20 or 30 years ago. There was a small farm, most of the animals was tied up, and it was in a very dry indoor environment in the winter, and they was outside in the summertime. Now it has changed to bigger farm, where most of the conventional farms has animals indoor all year, and it is on a concrete floor, and it is much more humid and rough environment for the hoofs than there was before. So that is a major challenge for the cow's hoof and also for the young animal's hoof as well. And then there's a huge increase in the performance of the animals, going from more low milk yield on 5,000 to 8,000 liters to today, where we have a lot of cows that is producing more than 12,000 liters a year. So we really ask for a lot more from the cow than we did before, and at the same time, at least the Holsteins has gone much bigger, and also the growing weight has a big impact on the hoof health.
And what can poor hoof health actually result in for the cow and also for the farmer?
For the cow, it gives it pain, and it will not be able to move around as easy as if it was healthy. It will lay more and eat less, but the genetics will force it to still give a lot of milk, and in that way it will lose weight and will get into a negative energy balance. And this is the start of going downhill for the cow. So the pain that is the cause from the hoof is the start of the problem. For the farmers, it will impact his income from the cow, because a cow that has bad hoof health will start losing milk in a few days, and it is very hard to get it up again because it's a disease that takes long time to cure. And in the end, it will result in that you have to get her into involuntary culling and not use her potential for the next breeding period.
Yeah, and actually culling is unfortunately one of the main negative consequences of poor hoof health and also lameness, etc. Jim, what sort of differences and similarities do you see between what Kai is describing here and you know what you're seeing with farmers in Australia and New Zealand?
Thanks. I guess the difference here is the environment that we operate in. The concerns and the challenges are very much the same. In Australia and New Zealand, the cattle tend to travel longer distances every day. So locomotion becomes a very important component of what they must perform. And so the discomfort that they feel is exacerbated by the fact that they may be walking several kilometres every day from pasture to the milking shed. So that's probably the key difference from a management perspective. But the consequences are, as Kai has explained, it's that discomfort and subsequent loss of production, be it in milk yield or discomfort and negative energy balance and impacts on fertility and the likes. And I guess we often compare, if you want an analogy of how this can work, we like to compare our cows to Formula One. As Kai said, we've got cows that are trying to do extraordinary production targets these days. So as soon as you have a car running at Formula One speeds, when the tyres are faulty, we run into trouble. Lewis Hamilton runs into the sand and it's all over. So we need to ensure that we're able to keep the cow on track, that she can comfortably perform those tasks, particularly, as I say, with the long distances and harder conditions that we put the cows through.
Jim, what kind of role does nutrition play when we look at hoof health?
I think this is a really important area to consider, particularly in Australia, even more so than New Zealand. We use a lot of high energy rations to fuel our Formula One cars to get that milk production out of the cow. And the very high energy, high starch rations that we do push into cows in the pursuit of production has a significant impact on joint and hoof health. So, this is all part of the balancing act between production and overall health that we need to be considering.
So poor hoof health, it's largely due to management, environment, the recent years focus on production, these changes that both of you are describing. Let's try and look at ways we can overcome poor hoof health and some advice that you can share with our farmers out there listening. Kai, when a farmer comes to you, and you have decades of experience as a vet yourself, and he's struggling with poor hoof health, what are some of the first things that you recommend he looks into?
It's important to look at the individual cow as a beginning, but it's even more important to look at the herds as a unit. And the decision has to be based on data. So the ones that are around the cows have to do data collections. That might be the manager or the barn staff doing a lameness score. When they have the hoof trimmer, be together with the hoof trimmer, get the feedback from him. Like in the Nordic country, we have total registration of all events in the hoof box. So that will go into the national database, and you as a vet or a consultant is able to draw out the data and have it analyzed, and in that way better understand the underlying problem of the lameness. Is it a management problem because of how they are housed? Is it a feeding problem? Is it like Jim said, they have to go a long way and they are stepping on stones? So you not only look at the individual trying to turn off the fires at the individual cows, but because tomorrow there will come new one if you are not removing the actual cause of the lameness. The feeding is extremely important here. Is food of good quality? Is it malted? Is it warm? Do we in any way do mistakes? And therefore the feeding consultant is also a key player in the finding the solution for this problem.
What can the farmer and his staff do themselves on a day-to-day basis? Are there any sort of practical things that they can do to sort of just maintain the best possible environment for the hoofs?
it is to keep a good dry environment, and also for the beddings, so they are able to rest the numbers of hours that they required. There's bedding for each cow, and when they are standing waiting for getting milked, put in smaller groups instead of taking all the cows and waiting 2 or 3 hours on getting into the milking paddle.
Jim, from your perspective, what do you think is preventing farmers for instance, breeding for better hoof health? Because there are other tools in the box. There's some stuff that can be done in addition to good care and management, as Kai is mentioning.
I think the greatest challenge to breeding for hoof health is actually having really good information to work with, and remembering that when we see issues of hoof health, we have to act on it in the immediate term, and breeding is a longer term task. But to me, the biggest challenge that they face is having really good records to use. That's as we see it here in Australia and in New Zealand. Our records aren't quite the same as you have there in the Nordic countries through the Nordic evaluation, where there's so much more detail and so much more evidence that's recorded. So that's their biggest challenge here, and that's something that we can help them with.
How else can a farmer become better, and the staff, of course, could become better at actually spotting the hoof health early on? What are the indicators? What can they look for?
One of the advantages where we have cattle walking long distances is we do get the opportunity to observe the cattle as they move, and cows will give you several days warning of a problem that's occurring. We can study the cattle quite informally and detect a deterioration in their locomotion over a period of time, from the morning milking to the afternoon milking, and identify that animal and pull them out of the group to make the assessment that we need. So yeah, it is a matter of observation and that continuous attention to the way they walk. Now the key symptom that they'll show as they are moving is they start to arch their back as they become uncomfortable in their feet, and we'll notice that as you view the cattle across a group of cattle as they are transiting to the yards or transiting to the milking barn. So it is relatively straightforward to pick up, as long as people are trained to observe that.
And we actually had we've had a podcast on feed efficiency as well. And one of their tools they're using are cameras. And one of the things they started to mention is that you can see a lot from those cameras. You can actually observe what you just described, that if there's a change in the cow's behavior. So there's some technology going on in that field. Just to mention that as maybe a future tool to become even better at spotting that. Yeah. Kai, what options are there in terms of genetics? If hoof health is a sort of a general problem in the herd, what tools might be available to start really focusing on this in a particular herd?
Now we are talking about more long-term solutions, because if the cows are lame now, then the genetics can't help them. But if you are making a good plan for your hoof health, and look into the data you have today, how is the farm performing, and together with your breeding advisor, find new bulls that has a superior hoof health. And the hoof health from the bulls are again based on the same data that we gain in the farms from the hoof trimmers and from the veterinarians, and even from the barn staff themselves can register all these data. So we have it present when we are going to make the new mating plan. So there is a quite good variety of bulls that is superior on hoof health.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that tool is available. Jim, just a thought to you. Calling in a hoof trimmer is quite a common practice in Northern Europe and in the US and other parts of the world and stuff. Do you have that same routine in Australia and New Zealand?
Look, I think it's highly variable. To say that it is a routine would be in some instances correct, but I would say most often not correct. It's available, and as farmers would see cattle that are in distress with hoof issues, that's where they may call in. You know, in my view, the first option would be to get someone to come in who specialises in hoof health. If they then determine that there is a chronic issue that requires veterinary attention, then they can call for that. But this is the critical part of the process in the long term, is actually having someone skilled in that area to come and lift the feet of those cattle and tell them what's wrong. And if they can then identify the issue that they're facing, is it something that they can manage? Is it something that we can specifically target through the genetic records that we have on our cattle, that whether it be white line separation or sole abscess and these sorts of conditions, is that something that we can select to build a genetic resistance to within the herd in the longer term? Mm-hmm. If they don't move to a hoof trimmer or someone to intervene and actually identify the problem, they won't make progress on their solution.
Are all cattle breeds equally suited for all climates? Because I can't help wonder, you know, if the hoofs are a continuous problem, could that be something to do with environment or the breed, or what are your thoughts?
In my experience, different breeds do have different levels of inherent strength in their hooves, for certain. The other area that often comes into that conversation is even just as simple as the colour of the hoof. The darker hooves do seem to be harder wearing than the pale hooves. But I'm not a hoof trimmer and I'm not a veterinarian, so I haven't collected that data. But certainly there are differences between breeds, and I think that extends from dairy cattle to beef cattle. I think we see quite significant differences between breeds.
Kai is nodding, I think. What are your thoughts on this as a vet?
It is totally correct that the white hoof are more vulnerable than the black ones, and we also know it from the horses. They don't like 4 white hoofs on a horse. So that is correct. It is extremely important to look where are you in the world, what is your production system, how is your temperament for the animals, and then select what is best suited for you, and not just because your neighbor has a Holstein or a Jersey herd, then it might not be the right for you. So it is really, the comparison with the cars. If your neighbor has a Mercedes, you would like one too, but maybe you just have a need for a smaller car. So that's very important. And in the end, maybe crossbreeding also should be an opportunity to look into to improve hoof health.
Certainly, and let's try and look into this, because Jim, you've given us your best advice on how to improve the hoof health in dairy herds. Let's look at some of the future trends and technologies, and as you mentioned, Kai, also other options available. Kai, let's talk about health and animal welfare, which hoof health is a part of. What role will that play in the future, do you think?
It will play a huge role, both for the farmers, that they have healthy cows, and it will give them a better economy to have these long living cows. But also for us as consumers, it's important that our production animals has the best life, and is not in any kind of pain related to the production system or the production level. That is not okay in the future, I'm sure. And then where it's also very important that we are getting training, getting education. We have trained hoof trimmers, or the farm people are going on courses so they can do a proper job on the hoof trimming, because you can also do a lot of extra pain and discomfort for the cow if you're not doing it in the right way, and even make things worse than there was before. And again, data is the very essential, so that we as breeding company can select the right bulls. We are dependent on the data from the farms to do a proper work in breeding companies and provide with the right bulls, and we can put more pressure on the breeding department, saying it is very important that we are doing a better job in hoof health, and then look less on the size of the cows or the color of the cows or the milk yield in the end. But it is difficult to be in the breeding department, because they also have to look into reproduction indexes and any other indexes. So we have to balance our requirement. But this is a very important issue.
Mm-hmm. So Jim, from your perspective, why do you think health is becoming such an important factor to consider for farmers around the world?
I think this is a really good question. The impact of consumer sentiment is now reaching right down to farmer level, and issues of health, and in particular hoof health, which is a really obvious health challenge that people can see. This is something people don't like to see. Farmers have never liked to see cattle in distress. Farmers have always worked to give their cattle the highest comfort level possible. Let's make no mistake about that. But this is now becoming an issue in the consumer space, where milk processors, food manufacturers and retailers are making claims around animal welfare with their products that they're marketing. So we now have an expectation from the general public around issues of health, issues of lowest possible use of medications, antibiotics and so forth. These are all now becoming matters of common conversation in urban households away from the farm. And if the consumer of our products, whether that be within our country or external, as is the case in Australia, where more than 80% of our dairy product is exported, there are people all over the world that have concerns around animal welfare, and they're the ones that give us social license to continue to do what we love doing in breeding good livestock and producing healthy food. So it's become an increasing concern because of an increasing awareness and consciousness in the consumer space.
Kai, when you look at these trends that are happening around the world, especially around consumer demands and animal welfare and stuff, where are we going to be 5-10 years down the road? If you could look in your crystal ball and sort of say, what conversation are we going to have about not just hoof health, but animal welfare and health in general?
Yes, and I don't like that question, because it's quite impossible to look 5 years in the future in the cattle business, because a few years ago, 10 years ago, we was using old bulls that was tested on the daughters. Today we are using nearly only very young bulls that is genomic tested. So I was not able to foresee that situation. No one was 10 years ago. But that is what the technology gives us. And one of the progress that has been done quite recently is the sex semen. And in that way we can speed up the generation interval, and we have more females to select among when we are selecting our future cows. So we really have to look at how are we handle the cows from she was 0 to 2 years, and in that way we make a much better fundament for a long living cow that is producing a lot of milk and still in good comfort. So the sex semen, and also more intensive use of the new technologies in embryo transfer and ovum pickup system and IVF. So there's a lot of new technologies that is within the range of what we can improve in the coming years.
Jim, how do you think we're going to balance this, obviously the need to produce and then looking after the animal health and welfare at the same time? That seems like those not opposites, but certainly two things to sort of manage together.
I think, again, great question. I think this is something that farmers have done very well for a very long time, and that is the balancing act that Kai refers to is becoming, if you like, it's changing. The things we need to balance are potentially different moving forward, but it's still about balancing, and we need to focus on, we need to look at climate, we need to look at feed efficiency, we need to look at a whole range of issues. We're talking here about hoof health in particular, and one of the great things that we, I think, are seeing a move towards is we might step a little bit away from Formula One. We may not have to search for that maximum speed. We may actually look for the most efficient way of producing milk and the most efficient way of farming. And so I think this is where we will start to see people having a focus on optimums rather than maximums, rather than it all being about feed them as much as you can, patch up their feet, keep them going back, make as much milk as you can. If we can balance these sometimes conflicting influences, and we can get ourselves a more, I'll call it sustainable, more profitable focus, I think that's the balancing act that they need to work towards.
So how do you convince the farmers to take this journey and actually start, maybe not lower production, but I like the part you said about focusing on the optimum rather than the maximum?
Well, we've just published our IBM Innovative Breeding magazine here in Australia, and in that we featured an article that was written about an operation in the UK where they were housing Holsteins 24 hours a day and feeding them as much as they could to produce maximum milk, and they weren't making a margin. So it was a high performance Formula One team making no money. They have changed their focus. They have changed their breeding program. They've changed their management program, and they're now producing significantly less. They've gone from I think it was 9,000 litres average per cow. They're back at 5,000 litres per cow. However, they're running more cows. The cows do it more comfortably, and they're now making a significant margin, particularly on the savings of lower inputs. They're now making such a stronger margin that they've purchased a second farm, and they're expanding their business. I think that type of case study is a compelling argument to just show to farmers that it isn't all about going as fast as you can and running the risk of taking that Formula One into the barrier and ending your race. Perhaps if we take a slightly slower truck, maybe even a tractor, and take to the track, we'll still get around safely, and we can do this in a sustainable way that actually delivers us good outcomes for cattle, good outcomes for production, good outcomes for farming families, and I think the people away from farming would look back and actually say we're really pleased with the changes that we've seen.
We could end it here, but you've made Kai smile. Any closing? I think it was the tractor.
That was my whole aim.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Any closing remarks from you, Kai?
No, I think that would
be I think that was very nicely put.
Yeah, strong statement.
Very, very nice way to end. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining the BreedCast today. I want to thank our expert guests, Kai Abrahamsen and Jim Bruce, and for taking us first through the challenges around poor hoof health and how to overcome these, and then also looking at how sort of general health will look in the future in dairy and beef farming. If you would like to learn more, please visit our hoof health area at VikingGenetics.com. Lots of great tools and insights. Thanks to our guests for sharing your knowledge and insights with us, and thank you to everyone out there for listening. If you have a topic or an idea for, a future episode for the BreedCast, or any questions, something you'd like us to focus on, please visit the breedcast.com or send us a message on the Facebook page. My name is Louise Rønn Svane. Please join me for the upcoming BreedCast episodes on the latest trends in cattle genetics and sustainable farming.